Hi, I'm Bri, and today I'm going to be talking about the recent week that I spent riding across the Alps on the Norton Commando 961 SP. We'll talk about the bike in a bit of the details, get into what I got up to actually on the trip, how the bike handled it, and let's say some of the challenges of riding this bike across the Alps as well.
Thank you to BikeSure for sponsoring this video production. BikeSure has been in business for over 30 years. As a specialist insurance broker, they treat every customer as an individual, and no matter what you ride, they'll have a policy to suit, from classic bikes to modern and everything else. We've put a link to their website in the video's description if you'd like to get a quote.
So let's start with a bit about the trip itself. So Malle, who are normally known for their luggage and apparel, also organise some trips, one of them being the Malle Mountain Rally, which spends 6 days going across 6 countries, 1,500 miles across all the highest and coolest passes and roads in the Alps. And that is something that was, far beyond my wildest expectations of something that I would not only have the opportunity to do, but be capable of doing. So on the first day of the trip, I had only had my license my full license, that is, for 3 months. So that's how long I would have been able to ride this bike. And I actually saw it for the first time in Austria when I landed. I don't want to spoil my opinion for the end of the video, but I just have to say now that it was the most incredible week ever. The setup of the trip is just so well organised. The route is incredible. You hit all these most amazing roads. I couldn't even imagine roads like that existed, let alone that I was going to get to ride them and on a bike like this. The Malle team are incredible. They bring the most experienced range of riders, paramedics, engineers, chefs, anyone you could possibly need up the Alps. So the 100 of us that were riding on the trip were really well supported, and I'm so grateful for that kind of organisation and support. Something else they do is put together a route card. So every night you sit down with your team and plan out your route, hitting all of the key markers that they've set out for the next day. And that will show you, if there are any big sets of switchbacks or mountain passes that you're going to be hitting, you're warned about them just the night before, so you don't have too long to worry about them, but just enough time to get excited. But to be honest, switchbacks, we'll come back to that later when we go on to challenges, because that was not completely smooth sailing for me. But let's go in now with some of the pros, because there's lots. Okay, so the first pro is the very first thing that I saw about it when I turned up in Austria and saw it there waiting for me in the car park, which is the design. It's absolutely stunning. I love classics, as many of you will have seen, and modern classics as well, and I just think this is so beautifully done. It's so eye-catching. I had so many people stop me on the trip and say that it was such a beautifully designed and looking bike. I love the way that it's kept so simple with the colouring, but it's got these little splashes of gold as well. I just think it looks really classy and elegant and timeless. So big thumbs up for the overall styling. This bit at the back, I like. I did wonder initially if this came off and had a little compartment to put things in, but it is actually to add on a pillion seat if you wanted to, which I didn't. If I'd been carrying my own luggage and it hadn't been transported in the trip van, that probably would have been handy to have, so I could have strapped a bag across. But as I didn't need to actually transport my own luggage, it was absolutely fine to have that and lean properly into the sports element of the styling. The seat over here, really beautifully stitched. Love the way that this is done with the Norton design. And comfort of a seat is very important to me, as it should be if I'm riding sort of 8 to 12 hours a day across the mountains. And getting on it for the first time, I did think, okay, is this going to be a problem? I'm about to spend a very long time sat on this bike. And weirdly, it was incredibly comfortable. It kind of doesn't look like it should be that comfortable. It doesn't look like it's designed for comfort. It looks like it's designed for, for style and speed and to be that kind of elegant looking modern classic. But weirdly, something about the shape of the seat, it's nice and squishy, so comfortable, had no problems. One of the things that might have helped with that slightly though is I actually had the Malle tank bag on here, so I was able to lean on the tank bag a little bit to kind of adjust my positioning throughout the day, and that just sat on here and strapped up around the sides. That gave me a little bit of extra comfort and meant that anything I needed for the day was contained in that tank bag and I didn't have to have a backpack. So that was awesome. And then moving up closer to the front of the bike, I like the fact that the clocks and everything are kept so simple. There's a little button in the center here so you can cycle between some of the key information, but it really is kept super minimal. There's no fuel gauge exactly. Of course, if I'd taken the time at the beginning of the trip to work out how much it used per tank, I could have used the mileage to work off of, but instead kept it very easy for myself, being a bit lazy, and just waited for the fuel light to come on, which generally meant I had about 30 miles until I need to fill it up. So I'd usually just go and grab some fuel at the time, but I think probably does about 130 miles for the tank. So those were nice and simple, which I really liked, but always nice and easy to see lights. For the rest of this, again, just very simplistic. Nothing sort of extra that you don't need. I have found some of the bikes I've ridden before, there's quite a lot going on, can get a bit fiddly, but this has been kept really simple. I think the only thing, if I was being really pedantic in this area, that might have been nice but I definitely didn't need, and to be fair, we were so blessed with the weather, absolutely wasn't a problem, would have been something like heated grips. But I mean, you can spec things like that up and add things afterwards at your own choice, so the option is there. You might notice the end of the brake lever, but I'm going to save that for now. We'll come back to that. And as far as the rest of the design goes, there's lots of chrome, which initially thought, is this going to be a nightmare to keep clean? Is it going to be a bit of a problem? But truthfully, it's so beautiful. I think if I had this longer term, I'd absolutely just make the effort to keep it clean, because it just looks so wonderful. Next, let's talk about power and the engine. So it's the 961 and it is 77 brake horsepower, 5 gears. So gears are pretty long, but we'll come back to the length of the gears and slow speed when we get onto the challenges in a bit. But let's talk about where it handles at its absolute best. So up at the higher revs, sort of the 5,000 RPM kind of region, absolutely stunning. So if you're going sort of long, sweeping bends at higher speed, it is absolutely fantastic. It's really got the acceleration, it's really got the go, and the handling, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute, absolutely wonderful. It goes and it also stops. It's got these big Brembo brakes here on the front, and they are absolutely fantastic. Stops nice and easily, and it has got, although it's very simple as a bike generally, it does have ABS as well, which is very good. And the back brakes, I mean, they're back brakes, so they're not really as much for stopping in the same way that the front ones are, but for controlling the bike and giving it that bit of extra sort of friction and connection over things like the switchbacks, tight corners, they did what they needed to do. So I said when we talk about handling and the balancing of this bike and the way that it handles is just brilliant. I found so many times you can just fully, in a way that I've not found actually with any of the other sort of modern classics that I've ridden, you can just fully take all your hands off, absolutely no kind of touching the bike really at all when you're riding, and it just stays perfectly, completely centered. There's no sort of wobble or feeling of like misalignment anywhere. It feels really nicely put together from that perspective. Weight wise as well, it's 230 kilos with a full tank, which, yeah, that sounds pretty heavy for looking at the bike, but moving it round, it's low down, so there's not a problem at all. The weight feels very low in the bike, and I am 5'6", so my feet both sides flat on the floor, can really easily sort of maneuver it around, which is perfect, and sits nicely on the side stand, which again doesn't lean too far, as you can see. The pegs down here, initially I was undecided on these because they're not sprung, so they do flip up when you're manoeuvring it, and sometimes when you pull away, if you've forgotten to kick them back down, you have to sort of wiggle your feet around a bit to click them back in. But on balance, I've come to actually prefer the fact that they're not sprung loaded, because when you're manoeuvring around, they don't keep bashing you in the leg. You can just click them up out the way, get on with manoeuvring, and then when you want to, click them back down. Same goes for the pillion pegs though. Obviously I wasn't using that because this one doesn't actually have the pillion seat. While I'm on the bike, shall we have a look at the sound? Because this got a lot of attention, to be honest. Whenever I started up the bike, a lot of heads turning because it just sounds so good. I was so excited to get on it every morning or at every stop, even if it was boiling hot and I'd had to put all my leather jacket and this, that and the other back on. Turning the bike on just instantly lit up my face with a huge smile because it sounds so good. I'm hoping that being out in this field will do it justice, but let's turn it on and you can see for yourself. I've really missed this sound in the week since I last was on this, so it just sounds amazing, doesn't it? Okay, so we've covered lots of the things that I love. There are still a couple more that I'm saving for the end, but it's probably time to be a little bit nitpicky and talk about the things that maybe aren't my favourite, or maybe I'd prefer if they were ever so slightly different. These, for a start, I think on a lot of bikes, you know, they can be designed so they're a bit more hidden and enclosed, but these ones are very much front and centre. I used a quad lock while I was on the trip, so my phone was sort of here, like ever so slightly blocking out parts of the dials, but you know, shouldn't be going 140 mile an hour around the Alps, so you know, that wasn't too much of a concern. It was mostly angled downwards, but it did just mean, you know, I was looking down a little bit at the maps and very much in my field of view those are there, which I'm going to be a tiny bit nitpicky about the design. It would be about that. While we're looking in that area as well, I did say that I would address the end of the brake lever, which I probably should. So did I drop the bike while I was in the Alps? Yes, I actually dropped it on both sides. So if you have a little look at the back, I have ever so slightly bent the rear light on this side, which it just, while I was manoeuvring it around, had a little fall over halfway up a mountain after I'd stopped to take a picture. Yeah, it's only bent slightly though, it stayed on there, okay. And then as for this one, which I promised I would mention, this was halfway up Stelvio. I was going round, so you're on the right hand side of the road, I was going round a tight right-hander sort of upward switchback, and there was a car in my line, and because there was other traffic, I'd taken it quite tight, and this doesn't have the tightest turning circle. It's you know, it is a little bit wider, and I had just gone up, there was a car there, and came down onto that side down the mountain and actually managed to backward roll with my legs going right back over my head down Stelvio, which was obviously a bit of a whirlwind, unexpected thing to have happened. A couple of people stopped and gave me a hand with picking this up, and the only things that came up from it were the last sort of inch of the brake lever, which I actually have and will be framed in my workshop, and the other thing was just a small bruise on my knee, but other than that we were fine. So that switchback, absolutely not a testament to the bike at all. That was a combination of me probably and the oncoming car. But I have to say, switchbacks were a little bit of a challenge initially, not just because I'd never seen one before, but the way that the bike is geared. It's got 5 gears and they're pretty long, so first gear almost feels more like second gear on another bike. At slow speed, you've really got to, you know, find out what works best for the bike, give it quite a lot in the way of revs. It doesn't really do slow speeds as well as it does fast speeds. really does fast speeds well, but slow speeds and just getting to know the bike were a little bit more of a challenge. The other thing I found that was, it doesn't even really feel fair to call this a challenge, because to be honest, most of it was probably just the boots I was wearing. So I did the full trip in my Red Wings, these ones here, with some thick waterproof socks, filling up the space so that they didn't rub, but I did everything in my kind of casual gear that I wear normally. I didn't buy any sort of special alpine stuff for the trip. I just wore what I would normally around the Kent countryside. I could definitely feel some vibration through the pegs, and actually through the seat, and to an extent through the bars as well. Definitely has a bit of vibration, but for some people that's probably not going to work. But for me, I found like it just added to the fact that this really feels like a classic. Of all the modern classics I've ridden, which is actually quite a few now to be fair, this bike feels more like a classic than any other modern classic I've ridden. It's just something really special about it, and it might not have all of the tiny little features that all of them do, you know, things like little heated grips and the dials that tell you this, that and the other. It's quite stripped back and simple in that sense, but it just feels so special, and I was so excited to get on it every day, and so excited to have it come back to my house with me when I got back to England. And of all of the bikes I've ridden, this is the one that I really, really wish I could keep. Feels like I definitely have a special connection with it. So we should probably talk about the price, because this is an awesome bike, and it retails for, I think it's between 17 and 19, depending on exactly how you spec it up, because there's a few different options to personalize it a bit and make it your own. And to be honest, as a post-buying thing, it's definitely really customizable as well, which I think is really cool. As far as value for money goes, I am not currently in a position to be spending that kind of money on a bike. Unfortunately, I would absolutely love to. But do I think it's worth the money if I had that to spend? And to be honest, you know, it's hand built in England, and the production quality of it feels really lovely. I think it's an absolutely awesome bike, and I do think, you know, it is at a more premium price point, absolutely, than a lot of the ones that are mass produced in much higher numbers. We're not going to see as many of them out there, and they do just feel really, really special. I have never been more excited to get on a bike than I have with this one. It is just absolutely awesome and has just brought a whole new excitement to riding for me, and I really do owe that to this bike. So I think I've made it pretty clear that I think this is an awesome bike, but is it the right thing to ride across the Alps? You know, I had not had my license for very long at the time, and well, still haven't, because it was only a couple of weeks ago. But this bike is obviously going to be a bit more of a challenge to ride across the Alps than something like an adventure tourer that's designed to do it. And I saw one every few minutes across the Alps, pretty much. Someone riding across with the big panniers and, you know, all the right setup, all the right gear that's designed for it. But would I want to do that myself? I have to say, if I'd gone for the first time, yeah, that probably seems like it should have been the sensible thing to do. And on paper, absolutely, there are more appropriate bikes on paper to ride across the Alps than this. Is there anything I think would be as fun to ride across the Alps on this? And at the end of the day, that's what matters. You know, you do a trip like that for the enjoyment, for the achievement, and the sense of achievement that I got from going at the beginning of the week and not having heard of a switchback to by the end of the week loving riding them and feeling really happy and accomplished. This bike is such a cool thing to ride across the Alps on. And if any of you have the opportunity to do a trip like the Great Malle Mountain Rally and take a bike like this Norton, I honestly can't recommend it enough. It was a truly incredible experience, and I'm so grateful to the teams for the opportunity. So a huge thank you to Norton Motorcycles for loaning me this awesome Commando 961 SP, and also to the Malle team for putting on such an amazing mountain rally. And thank you to all of you for watching.